Hey everybody, Jane here, and I am here today with my May 2021 wrap-up. And wow. May was a weird reading month for me. I have 4 DNFs, and I think that is the most books I have ever DNF'd in a whole month. I also read, 5 books, and all of them were 4 stars. So it was very much an all or nothing month. It was I either really enjoyed it or I just didn't. And I do think that there were some life things at play. My kids headed down to their dad's at the end of the month. We were preparing for it, but they, like the first week of June, they went to stay with their dad for the summer. And that's always kind of an emotional time getting prepped for that. And I think that might be why some of the books hit well and other ones I really struggled with. You'll see that most of the books that I kept and enjoyed were a little more on the lighthearted, fun side because I really needed some comfort reading and I needed some fun, and I didn't need anything too complicated or dark or gritty. So without further ado, let's get through the books that I read, or didn't in some cases read, during the month of May. The first book was also the first I tried to read at the start of the month, and it was one that I think was just not quite what I was expecting it to be. And that was Secrets Under the Parking Lot, the true story of Upper Arlington, Ohio, and the history of Perry Township in the 19th century. So this book I was interested in because it's the history of Ohio, and that's where I live. And I don't live far from Upper Arlington. I actually, years ago, had a boyfriend in Upper Arlington, and I would travel there on the weekends to see him. So it's about an hour and a half away from where I am. So I really was excited to read a book about something that was local. And the first chapter I really enjoyed, which was general Ohio history. Then I got to the second chapter. And the second chapter is titled Revolutionary War Patriots and Pioneers of Perry County. And basically, it starts to read from that point on, kind of like the genealogy section of the Bible. So, you have like a person's name and a brief biography about them, who their children were, what they did in their life. And it just was a little bit too much. It felt like I was reading a lot of short biographies, because like that one I just showed you was a longer one. There were some that were like 3 paragraphs. This person did this. This is the kids they had. Their kids did this. And it just got really boring really fast. So while I enjoyed the stuff in the start of the book about the history of Ohio and what it was like living during the early colonial days of Ohio, once I got to the who's who in the history, I just was bored and I couldn't keep going. So I didn't get very far in this. I think I got about 35 to 40 pages. And it's a fairly short book. My next DNF, and this is one I kind of thought would be a DNF, was one that the library chose for me. And that is Transcription by Kate Atkinson. This is a book that I kind of knew wasn't going to be my thing, but I wanted to give it a try. And it turned out that it wasn't not my thing for reasons that had nothing to do with why I thought it wasn't going to be my thing. So this book is about a girl named Juliet. And it's a flashback. We start in the present, and some stuff just went down. And then we flash back to where she was involved in spy work during World War II. And I don't really enjoy espionage or spy books, but the spy parts, at least as far as I got in this, weren't like the 007 high energy stuff like that. She literally transcribes stuff. And then at one point she does infiltrate a group of women to talk to them about like connections they have, people they know type thing. But it's not like the traditional spy novel that I was expecting to not like. For me, I just really had a hard time with Juliet. She is very annoying as a character, at least she was to me. She spent the whole book going, why isn't anybody seducing me? Why isn't anybody seducing me? And I don't know how far I got into this since it was an audiobook. I would guess I got to about the halfway point, but I'm not sure. And I was so tired of her wanting everybody to seduce her and just feeling like I didn't care about her as a character very much. I wasn't very interested in the work that she was doing as a spy. And also, and this is a very personal thing, there's a lot of anti-Semitism in here, and of course that's natural for the era. But that was kind of the thing that at the end of the day, I wasn't connecting to the book, and I got tired of the anti-Semitism, even though it was totally appropriate for the story and the time. I just didn't want to hear it anymore, and I decided that I didn't want to finish the book. So that one, that was a DNF. And that was one that the library chose for me. I totally understood why they chose it. It just wasn't a good fit. The next one was a book that was for the library book club. And I got about 80 pages in it and decided it just wasn't for me. And I think part of it was I was expecting something a little different than what it was. So this is a book called The Confession Club. And I'll be really honest, I'm not sure if this is book one or if there are other books. But we're told that there is a group of women who are meeting and talking. I don't know if they had a book club or what. But one of them has a confession, and then they all hang out and start doing this confession thing. And that's kind of what I thought the book was about. But like, that's already established by the time you start reading it. So you don't get to see what this first confession was, or, you know, how these women started this club. You just get into the club and people are confessing things. And a lot of the stuff they're confessing is fairly benign. So I wasn't really interested in that. And then one of the characters started having a romance that just wasn't working for me. The person that she was kind of having feelings for, or falling for, is a guy who is homeless, but that's not my issue with him. He was homeless, living with a group of people, dating somebody, and then just up and left one day and moved to this town where he meets her. And she starts falling for him, but you know that he's not a good person to connect with, because he's probably not going to stick around. Like, you cannot convince me, no matter what you do, that these people are going to have any kind of happily ever after, because his old girlfriend doesn't even know they broke up. He mentions she's calling, and he's just not picking up. Nobody knows what happened to him. They just probably assume he died, because that's what happens to people who are transient sometimes. And that's one of the reasons, you know, in the serial killer movies and the detective shows, they're like, kill the transient people, because nobody's gonna catch you if your motive is just you like to kill people. So I was not vibing with this book at all, and I tried to push through, and I just wasn't interested. So I didn't end up going to book club anyway, and there were just a lot more books on my TBR that I was much more interested in reading than that one. Alright, we have one more DNF. This particular DNF was a me issue, not a book issue. The book was really good. I just feel like it wasn't the right time in my life to be reading it. I had other things I wanted, and this is kind of a heavy book, and it was nonfiction, and I just didn't want to read it this month, even though I found it very inspiring. And that is, We Had a Little Real Estate Problem. And this talks about Native Americans who are in the comedy industry, and in Hollywood in general, their treatment and different things that happened in history. And it was very good, but obviously lots of stuff is discussed. Lots of stuff that I just wasn't feeling this month. I just needed something light and nice, and this wasn't it. This was so good and so powerful, and there are so many Native American comics, even now, who are traveling great distances to pursue their dreams. and who are working so hard, and I very much appreciated reading about them. I appreciated seeing another artist struggle, because as a writer, I love these kind of books where you are seeing people struggle to live up to the potential they have and to get their dreams. And I loved all of that about this. I just really couldn't get through all the history and all the terrible things that were done to these people. And again, wonderful book. If this is something that interests you, please pick it up. It was really good. It was just too heavy for what I could handle this month. Alright, so now on to the books that I did read, all of which I gave 4 stars to because it was that kind of weird month. The first book I read and gave 4 stars to was Nevermore. Nevermore is a middle grade fantasy about a girl named Morrigan Crowe who is believed to be a cursed child, and as a cursed child she is supposed to die on her 11th birthday, I think it is, at eventide. And that time is coming up, and a guy named Jupiter North shows up and says, "Come with me, and if you do, basically you can live." She goes, she finds out that there are these trials to join this mysterious society that he's part of, and if she can be one of the finalists in the trials, she will be able to survive and stay in Nevermore with him. It was a reread for me. I gave it 4 stars last time, gave it 4 stars this time. I've talked about it quite a lot on my channel. I really enjoy it, and I'm actually, I've read book 2 in the series as well, which was a 5-star for me, so I like book 2 better. The big thing that is hard for me with Nevermore, at least the first book, is the world building is not where I would want it to be. And I really struggled with that, because it is such a good book and so freaking confusing. My kids were in the car and we listened to it as an audiobook while we did our travels, and just even they were super confused by what was happening to Morrigan, what was going on, and it just was such a struggle to get them into it. Once they were into it, they really loved it, they really cared about what was happening to Morrigan, but just like the beginning of the book, there's very little explanation for things, and there's a lot of world building but without explanation. And even my second read through, I felt that way. So I couldn't give it 5 stars because it just doesn't explain a lot about their world. Particularly, one example is their calendars. I don't understand how they work. So Morrigan's birthday is coming up and that's an important date, but their calendars don't work the same way ours do, where a date falls on a specific day. So there's kind of a thing in the beginning of the book where suddenly it's her birthday unexpectedly way before it's supposed to be. And I really got frustrated. Like, how do these people know? How do the dates and calendars and times and holidays and everything work in this world? I just didn't get it. I don't know if it's some kind of equinox thing. I don't know. But whatever it was, I was frustrated because I'm like, I really enjoy this book and the series, but I need to know what is happening, and you are not letting me know what is happening. So there was that one. Then the other 4 books were new to me reads, and the first one I read was also in middle grade, and I don't know if you'd consider it a fantasy. I think it's more like paranormal, but that is Bridge of Souls. This is the 3rd book in the Cassidy Blake series, I believe is what it's called. Yeah, in Cassidy Blake. So, I don't want to spoil too much since it is the 3rd book in the series, but Cassidy can see ghosts. Her best friend is a ghost. They hang out. Her parents are ghost hunters who cannot see ghosts, and in each book so far they've traveled to somewhere for her parents' television show, which talks about ghosts, like they're ghost hunting in different places. And in this book, they go to New Orleans. And there's a whole lot of stuff that happened. plots involving her ability to see ghosts and the ghosts in the area that, of course, her parents can't see. I really enjoyed everything in this series. Like I said, I've read all 3 books. I don't know if there will be more, because there was one particular thing that was kind of an issue starting in book 1 that resolved in this book. And after that resolution, I'm like, maybe you could continue, but I don't know that you'll have quite the same level of, like, you're gonna have to find a new plot, I guess is what I'm gonna have to say about that. Like, I can't go too into it because it would really spoil the other 2 books. But I felt like the plot tied up. Of course, there could be a new plot that starts. I don't know if this series is done or not, but I have really enjoyed reading it so far. The next book is Curiosity Killed the Cat Sitter, the first Dixie Hemingway mystery. This book, it was definitely kind of an emotional roller coaster, ups and downs as a read. There were things I really liked about it and things that really frustrated me. So our main character is a woman named Dixie. Dixie had previously worked on the police force, but a personal tragedy ended that. Her and her boss decided she was no longer ready and able to do her job, and she has become a pet sitter. So now she goes around and takes care of people's cats and dogs while they are out of town. Sometimes other critters, but mostly cats and dogs. In one of the houses where she cares for animals, she goes in to feed the cat, and there is a dead person in the house. It is not the owner of the house, because it's not the person that hired her, but they are dead. And she is having trouble getting a hold of the owner of the house. So she's not sure whether this person killed the person who's dead and is on the run, or if they've been kidnapped or something's happened. And of course, she has to make sure that the cat is taken care of because she is super hardcore about taking care of animals. This book, the mystery was so-so for me. I enjoyed it, but I didn't necessarily see it working the way it did until the end, and I was kind of like, okay. I love the animals, and I liked Dixie's story, but not necessarily Dixie. And I think that was one of the things that made this book a little bit complicated to rate, because it could have been a 3. It was a 4, but it could have been a 3. I absolutely was loving Dixie's backstory, but she as a person sometimes irritates me. Some of the ways that she thinks and things that she says, I just didn't always jive with, and sometimes she was just vulgar for no good reason, and I get that maybe that was the whole I used to be a cop thing, but I didn't find it necessary, and it kind of annoyed me. Like, there were times that I was like, okay, you're just being vulgar to be vulgar, and that kind of, I think they were trying to build her character with it, but it wasn't working for me, because that wasn't kind of how she was portrayed, at least the way I was seeing it. It was like, she's this way, and then all of a sudden, she's very vulgar about things. So, I had a little bit of trouble with Dixie, though I absolutely loved her backstory. Like, everything she'd been through, I cried, and it was such a good story and situation. I was a little bit confused because I thought the book was going a certain way, and it didn't really go the way I thought it was going, and I don't mean the mystery, I mean her character plot. I wasn't necessarily upset with how it went, I just kind of would have been much more okay with it going the way I thought it was going. I am willing to read more books by this author in this series. I hope that some of the things that I was hoping would happen and move her plot along in the direction I kind of wanted it to go, or at least in a direction that dealt with the things that I didn't feel like got dealt with. I also felt the wrap up of this was very quick. As soon as we learn what happens, it's like boom, wrapped up. And that was maybe left a little bit to be desired for me. I really enjoyed a lot of the secondary characters. Dixie lives in the garage above her brother's house, and her brother's husband are like characters that are very involved in the story, and they were so fun. There's another side character who I enjoyed as well. Just a really great cast, really great backstories. I just was really struggling in a couple places with certain choices the author made. But if you like mysteries, I definitely recommend this. Was a good one. The next book, I hadn't planned to read. Dixie was one that the library picked out, so good job, library. The next one was one I chose for myself, and I chose it because my best friend, it was on her shelf, and I'd said a while ago, oh, that sounds really good, and she decided she was going to pick it up and start reading it. So I decided, hey, she's reading it, it looks like it could be cute and funny, and I'm really feeling in the mood for that, so I'll pick it up, and we can read it together. Except that she ended up not reading it, and so I ended up finishing it, and I don't know if she's going to finish it at some point. Like, she didn't put it down because she didn't like it. She just is very much in the middle of reading a series, and she was waiting on the next book to come to the library, and when it came, she was like, oh, back to the series that she's really hardcore into. That series is Outlander, and if you watched my TBR, you know that I am starting that series slowly in the audiobook version. I do not expect to love it as much as she does, but we will see. Anyway, so that's why I picked this up, and it is called One to Watch. Guys, this book was an emotional roller coaster for me. Our main character's name is Bee, and she is a plus-size woman and a fashion blogger. And one night, her and her friend are watching a television show that is very similar to what we have called The Bachelor. I don't remember what it is called. Oh, it's called Main Squeeze. And she puts out on her social media, which is obviously very vast because she's a fashion blogger, kind of a complaint that there's not enough diversity in such shows. So, long story short, she ends up being asked to be the Bachelor or the Main Squeeze in one of these shows, and it's a crazy ride. I did not always like Bee, and I did not always like some of the issues that she had in her personal life. Prior to going on the show, there's this guy that we meet that she's really obsessed with, that she can't seem to get over, and I didn't like that whole storyline, that him and everything. It just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth because it was not good. There is so much talk about body image and the treatment of plus size people, and I get that needed to be because of the content, but holy cow, it was hard to read at times. Like, there was a point where it was so real to me and so close to my personal experiences of body shaming and fat phobia that I put the book down and cried for 5 minutes. I'm not even kidding. It was really a traumatic read in places. So I think if you are plus size and have a lot of body issues or have had issues with your body image, make sure you're in the right headspace to read this. On the other hand, there is so much diversity in this book, and I really loved the diversity and the representation of her as a plus-size woman. There are different races. There's a lot of discussion about members of the LGBTQIA community. I don't want to give too much away because it might spoil things, but it was just a really diverse, good read, and at times this book was so fun. I definitely struggled because I was really wanting this to be more of a rom-com, and it really wasn't. It wasn't. And it was just a complicated book. One that I did end up loving, but it just it was not what I expected going in. That also seems to be a theme this month. I was expecting a light, fun rom-com with a plus-size woman, and oh boy, not even a little. I was okay with the way things turned out, but like the chapter before the end, something happens and I was like, oh, if they don't finish this the way it needs to be finished, I'm not even going to be able to have it. And I really thought they were going to do some things I didn't like, but it was saved at the end. I was fine. But just, this was a good book, but it was a complex read. And like I said, if you're not in a good headspace and you have body image issues, hold off on it until you are in a really good headspace, because, oh doggy, it was rough. And the last book. This one is from an author. It's called My Not So Perfect Life. And it is from an author I've read before, Sophie Kinsella. And so I was reasonably sure I was going to enjoy this. I will say that for the first half of this book, it was a 3-star read for me. I was liking it, but not loving it. It was really slow, really had a hard time, and then it kind of picked up later in the book. So if you start it, just be aware that for me, it took some time to get into it, and then once we got past a certain point, I was really into it. And that may be your experience too if your reading tastes are similar to mine. So this book is about Katie, who, her dream is to live in London, and that is what she is doing. But it's not really much of a dream. She lives in a small apartment with basically crap roommates. She has a job that is not her dream job, and she's trying to move up, but that's a slow, difficult process. She comes from a small farming area. Her mother has passed away, and her father and her have kind of a complex relationship. Among other things, she gets frustrated because her dad is very much one of those people who have lots of big ideas and never manage to properly follow through with them. And I really could relate to that because I have a dad who is a dreamer, who's always coming up with business ideas and things he was going to do, and like his big dream was to own a worm farm. And he's almost 70 years old, and most of that stuff never came to pass, but it didn't come to pass because like he just didn't really go the extra distance and make it happen. And I feel like I could relate to Katie in that way. With her relationship with her dad, I got. Her obsession with London, I didn't get. I'm kind of a small town girl, and I've never had that desire to go out to New York or California, which would be the American equivalent. And I don't really get this, I need to be a Londoner. But again, not in the UK, and happy to be a small town girl. So, the back of the book, or the information inside, gives a little bit more away than I would like to tell you, because I think it spoils, because so much of what is in on the inside cover tells like what is happening well through the middle of the book. So let's just say Katie has a life that she's trying for, it's falling a little bit short, and then something happens and she's really got to figure out how she's going to continue to have this life, or if it's a life that she even wants. This book was a lot of fun. It had some really good moments. It had some really good themes. I enjoyed it after we got past the things that I already knew because the flap told me it did. I did have a good time with this book. Sophie Kinsella is a fun writer to read. Things didn't always turn out how I wanted, or how I expected them to, but definitely in a way that was good and worked better than what I was expecting to happen. So overall, just a good, fun read. Did end up being a 4-star, but only once we got past like the middle of the book. So those were my reads for May. Have you read any of those books? And if so, what did you like and what didn't you like? If you have read other books similar to One to Watch, but that maybe are not so traumatic, but still would feature like plus size or different not perfectly beautiful people. You know, I liked the story, it just was very traumatic to read. I would love to hear about that. Any books you could recommend that are kind of light and fun and similar to the books on my reading list, I'd really appreciate. Also, please tell me what you read in May and what you liked, what you didn't. Did you have any DNFs? Have you ever had a month where you had 4 DNFs? Because I think this is my first. I'm not feeling so great about all those DNFs, but it is what it is. Also, my social media is below if you'd like to connect with me, as is a link to my books. I'm an author. The stuff I write is romance, not quite rom-com, not quite light and fluffy like that, but still, I think they're a good time. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.